Good morning to you all who are here today at the Jamaica Pegasus Hotel and to those joining us online, especially from outside of the corporate area and our regional and international stakeholders. This is the 11th annual staging of the Office of Utilities Regulations Director General's Stakeholders Engagement being staged here today. I am Elizabeth Bennett Marsh, and I'm the Public Education Specialist at the OUR, and I will be your Master of Ceremonies today. Before we get into our program, I'm duty-bound to advise you, based on our data protection stipulations, that we are recording this event and in the form of video, audio, and photography. Hi, Leo. And we will be using images, etc., on our social media platforms, in the mass media, print media, on our website, etc. So I hope you're all good with that. Okay, good. So before we start the proceedings, as we normally do, I'm inviting our Public Affairs Coordinator, Gordon Brown, to say a word of prayer as we seek guidance for a successful engagement.
Good morning, everyone. Back in the day when people said good morning and you heard people say good morning, it means that they're ready for breakfast. Is that the case here this morning as well? Good morning, everyone. That means we don't need to serve breakfast. Blessings to you all. I invite us all to just pause for a moment as we speak to Almighty God. Almighty, eternal God, you bless this land. Mighty God, you are almighty. You can direct where the storms and the earthquakes go because you created and you set the rules. We're here today, Lord. Guide us. Show us how to serve others across this nation. Help us to learn from the things that you have allowed to happen that we would not want, but we have been told in the scriptures must come in diverse places. Let us learn these lessons from each other as we share. And also, Lord, we ask that you bless this meal that is forthcoming and bless all participants online as well as in person here with us sharing. These things we ask in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you very much, Gordon. I always like when Gordon says his word of prayer. I feel blessed afterwards. Thank you. Our newest executive on the block, I'm still calling her new, the Deputy Director General with oversight for the telecommunications sector at the OUR, Ivona Channel, will do the official welcome and provide opening remarks. Please help me to welcome her.
Member of Parliament, Northwest Manchester, and Opposition Spokesman on Housing, Transportation and Works, Michael Phillips, Cabinet Secretary, Honorable Audrey V. Sewell, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sports, Mr. Denzel Thorpe, heads of government departments and agencies, members of the private sector, academia, the legal fraternity, and consumer advocacy groups, representatives of utilities providers, large and small, regional regulators, and other representatives, including community groups joining us online, media, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Once again, we have taken you out at this ungodly hour, but we hope you find this session engaging and useful. Every year, as we sit down to plan this event, at the forefront of our minds is how can we make this engagement beneficial to our stakeholders? It is an opportunity to update you on the work we're doing in keeping with our mandate. However, it also presents an occasion to put up front and center a significant utility matter that dominated the year, or to highlight global emerging trends, in the utility sectors from which Jamaica stands to benefit. So, in our planning session this year, there was no doubt that Hurricane Beryl would once again take center stage. However, unlike in July last year, she's nowhere near us. And so, to take liberties with a line from Loving Their song, Wild Gilbert, Beryl, now that you're gone, we can't chat behind your back. However, our talking will not be idle gossip. While disasters such as Gilbert and Beryl bring devastation and despair, amid the chaos, we also have valuable opportunities to learn. One of the most significant lessons from natural disasters is the importance of resilience. Resilience is the ability to recover. It's about evolving and becoming stronger in the face of adversity. It has been just about 9 months since Beryl's passage, but it's also just about 2 months before the next hurricane season. And so, the theme for today's event will present an honest look at our performance, the OURs, and that of the major utility providers, and our strategies that are being put in place to improve our preparedness and response. I am quite heartened by the mix of representation here today, which will only augur well for a vibrant discussion segment afterwards. Lest I forget, I am also up here to welcome you. And so I extend the warmest welcome from our Director General and the rest of the OUR team. We're glad you're here. We could not have had such a discussion as we're having today without including the stakeholders from areas hardest hit by Beryl. So I'm sure you will understand when I extend an especially warm welcome to them, including mayors joining us at Pegasus today and representatives from other parishes, including Westmoreland, Manchester, St. Elizabeth, and Clarendon, who are online. Welcome. I will end here by wishing you bon appetit and a happy engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Evona. So we now pause just for a little bit to allow the Pegasus to start serving breakfast and for a bit of socializing, if you will. We will resume in just a few minutes. Mindful of your time, we'll be continuing the proceedings once you start to break bread. And for those who are online, we ask that you, in the interim, just put where you're from in the chat so we can also recognize you. Thank you. Bon appetit. Our Director General, Ansel Hewitt, uses the opportunity to provide an update on the utility sectors under our watch. And his report is the State of the Utility Sector Report. And at this time, I now invite him to come up and make his report to you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. It's always a little bit of a dilemma when there are so many dignitaries in the room to try to go through the order. But I am pleased to see all who are with us this morning. Member of Parliament Phillips, Honorable Audrey Sewell, Cabinet Secretary. I'm particularly happy to see you with us this year. Heads of the utilities, heads of public agencies, other executives, the media, of course, the OUR staff, members of the office, and I'm sure I saw Yasmin. Yes. Right. So everybody, those online, and I'm told that some mayors are with us, are going to join us. We're happy to have all of you. So let me say good morning again, and thank you for braving Kingston traffic at this time of the morning to listen to us as we seek to update you on the work of the OUR and how we're seeking to discharge our mandate. One might aptly designate this as a gathering of the great and good. I hope most people fall into both categories, so It does not have to be either or either. As is customary for us, we try at this event to focus on salient issues which dominated the just concluding financial year, and to give a nod to some of our achievements and to admit with a view to fixing or improving areas in which we might have been found wanting. It is fitting that following the momentous events of last year, i.e., the storm and the afterstorm, that we're focused on the subject of recovery and resilience, as captured in our panel discussion theme, Resilience and Response, Learning from Hurricane Beryl. I'm grateful to the utility executives for putting themselves up for frank discussions on what transpired, what they got right, what they could have done better, and even more importantly, lessons learned, measures already taken, and preparations for another hurricane season. It is my hope that this morning's event will leave all of us with, one, a greater assurance that we are making preparations. We're heading into another hurricane season shortly. Better information on what obtains going into, during, and after a disaster event. And I say this with emphasis, realistic or reasonable expectations surrounding disaster recovery management for our utilities. I expect the contributions of and the engagement with our panel to be the main focus, and so I propose to limit my presentation this morning to providing you with a high-level accounting of a few matters that featured on the OER's regulatory agenda over the last 12 months, and to alert you to some of the major initiatives for 2025-26. Thereafter, I will cede the floor to them. So, of course, I have to start with Hurricane Beryl. But at this point, I also would pause to again acknowledge representatives of the parishes hardest hit by Beryl. And I'm told that, well, MP Phillips is in the room. I'm told that the mayors of Black River and Maypen are joining us. And Dan Reed-Delancey as well is online. So happy to have you, your worships. Now, July 3, 2004 is not a day we'll soon forget. 2024. Right. Thank you. I dare say that for those of us old enough to recollect it, and many of us are, it may be as significant as September 12, the date when Hurricane Gilbert hit us in 1988. Recall that Beryl intensified from a tropical depression to a hurricane in a mere 42 hours. It was the first time an Atlantic tropical cyclone achieved a Category 5 status so early in the season, 1 month earlier than considered the norm. By the time it had passed, sections of JPS transmission and distribution components of the power grid were in tatters, and approximately 65% of customers were without electricity. The major telecom providers reported that approximately 40% of their mobile network was down in the immediate aftermath. Internet service was also impacted, caused mainly by downed infrastructure such as cell tower damage, fiber breaks, inability to access sites to refuel, electricity supply issues, theft and vandalism. Water supply was also severely disrupted right across in the affected parish, but also across the country, resulting primarily from damaged systems, block access, and power outages. I'm sure the panelists will go into more details on the impact on their respective utility. I will, however, take a few minutes to offer observations and remarks from the OUR's perspective on our experience, activities, and teaching and learnings from Beryl. Not surprisingly, as service outages stretch from days into weeks, an increasingly frustrated and impatient public demanded to know what was being done by the regulator to ensure that their utility services were restored without delay, and indeed, what had been done before the hurricane to ensure that the utilities were prepared. There were days when we felt that the public expected the OER staff to be literally in the field driving the restoration process. And by the way, we did get into the field, hard hats and boots to boot, to see firsthand and what was taking place. You can start imagining Cheryl in hard hat and boots. Fact is, we did, and we're doing quite a lot. And in retrospect, we should have done perhaps a better job of communicating this. But what exactly should you expect from the OUR in response to a hurricane and other similar events? I submit that among our responsibilities are to, 1, monitor and oversee the progress of service restoration and recovery efforts. Facilitate coordination among critical stakeholders, including cooperation between the utilities and engagement with other public agencies and public authorities. Communicate with customers, providing timely updates on restoration efforts, ensuring regulatory compliance among utility providers, and conducting thorough assessments post-event and developing strategies for future disaster preparedness. Consistent with the above responsibilities, the major utilities are required to submit hurricane preparation plans prior to the start of the season for our review. These plans typically set out their disaster preparedness, including critical maintenance or business continuity plans, and how they intend to respond to and recover from the impact of storms, hurricanes, or hurricanes likely to occur during the season. Immediately following the passage of the hurricane, the utilities were also requested to submit a report detailing preliminary assessment or any damage and service outage. The OUR also requested scheduled restoration status reports from the companies. Notably, given the public angst and the need to ensure that all due diligence was being exerted, the frequency of these reports came down to a 24-hour period at a point in the restoration. An interesting anecdote, as an aside, is that sees with importance of communication services and connectivity to support the emergency response and restoration effort being led by the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management in the worst affected parishes. The OUR collaborated with that agency and an international relief agency to facilitate the provision of internet connectivity service to ODPM and the humanitarian responders. My point really is that a lot went on behind the scenes to facilitate as rapid a restoration as possible. And while we're sure there is room for improvement, the OUR was by no means a spectator. That said, I wish to make a few observations that we consider critical and which represents matters to which we should all pay attention. Hurricane Beryl underscored in a very big way the extent to which the major utilities and other key infrastructural agencies are interdependent and the need to ensure that their redundancies and contingencies are in place to mitigate what I'd like to term single points of failure. By the same token, it also underlined the importance of coordination and cooperation among the key stakeholders. The reality with Beryl was that apart from the wide-scale damage done to the network of each utility, which rendered it impossible to provide service to customers in some affected areas, there were many instances in which service could not be provided because another utility was out of service. By far, the most common instances were those in which the loss of power quickly resulted in a loss of communication services and piped water. I accept that it will be nigh impossible to provide the kind of redundancy and contingency in all cases to allow the utilities to be able to maintain services independent of one another. I am concerned as a regulator, however, about the prevalence of this single point of failure. And this is definitely a matter to which we are giving greater attention. This brings me to a second but related point which I want to make. To provide redundancy and contingency against the prevalence of single points of failure, our utilities must invest in such things as batteries, fuel storage, standby generators, pumps, solar panels, etc. To the extent that criminals and vandals prey upon these facilities, they make such investments prohibitive and endanger entire communities, sectors, and subsectors. The utilities can speak eloquently about how many areas were out of service for more days than would have been necessary if some criminal had not made off with critical emergency supplies and equipment, or where persistent criminal encroachment discouraged strategic contingency replacements. For JPS and NWC, electricity and water theft run in the millions, really approaching billions of dollars annually, resulting in a higher cost to paying customers and oftentimes significant service impairment. Then there is the cost of the damage to their network that such incursions often cause. Since the start of the year, Digicel and Flow have reported tens of millions of dollars in losses due to vandalism and theft of their infrastructure. The most recent incident occurred just a few weeks ago, on March 4, when vandals penetrated the underground network of fiber cables for both providers and intentionally destroyed them, leaving thousands of customers without landline, mobile, and internet service, and incurring millions of dollars in unforeseen expense to fix the damage. Indeed, we are privy to figure from one telecom operator, which indicates that over the period 2020 to 2025, the cost of dealing with damage to its network resulting from theft and vandalism amounts to billions. Island Network, another telecom provider, reports that over the years, about 30 of its sites were broken into and vandalized. These include theft of batteries, each of which cost about $500,000 to replace. So, as I have done in the past, I want to use this occasion to signal the OUR's unequivocal support for the strongest legal measures feasible against any kind of criminal encroachment on the network and services of the regulated public utilities. It must be recognized and noised abroad that these are costs that the society can no longer bear. For the reality is that where such incidents take place, it is not just the utilities that are victims, but the entire society is being victimized. We cannot afford to ignore, be silent, or be passive about such nefarious activities. The observations above apart, there are several initiatives that we have embarked on coming out of our experience of Beryl, which I will only mention here without expanding on them. We propose to collaborate with ODPM to develop a protocol to facilitate the temporary use of telecommunications facilities for relief measures in areas where the existing licensed telecommunication provider have no or limited service during or following a disaster. We are examining the possibility in consultation with the utilities of developing protocols for force majeure relief for affected customers after disaster. After disaster, the utilities need the revenue to recover. The customers themselves are in bad position and are, it's difficult for them to make payment. And we need to find some kind of solution to that. So we're engaging our thoughts on that matter. We have developed outage reporting protocols and network resiliency measures, an initiative that was in train prior to Beryl, but has taken on added significance subsequent to it. The OUR and MSET are currently engaged in discussions aimed at developing a national emergency telecommunications plan, which, among other things, will detail the roles and responsibility of all stakeholders and the step-by-step actions to be taken by each stakeholder in the different phases of the disaster management cycle. The OUR has taken vital lessons from Beryl relating to our communication. In the age of social media, an increasingly insatiable appetite for information, consistent update, timely, credible, regular, and structured communication is key. The age of social media, the age is also the instant age. Everything must be done immediately. This includes also the communication should be to the media, customers, relevant ministries, of course, the cabinet office, and the service providers during force majeure events. These events inevitably have a national impact on the OUR stakeholders and require adroit communication with them. Looking at our planned activities, you'll see that some were, and forgive the pun, blown off course by Beryl, and will therefore need to be undertaken in the upcoming period. Two notable such would have been tariff reviews for both the JPS and the NWC. Even without these activities, however, the team was kept busy during the year with a range of critical matters across the sectors. Mention a few and then close. In the water sector, we continued to look at the approximately $12 billion Rio Cobre water project. As the OUR's imprimatur was considered critical to its success. The OUR support for the project continues to be based on its potential to address water supply shortages that may result from severe drought. That, if it is executed as planned, it is poised to meet growing residential and commercial water demand in southeastern St. Catherine and the corporate area. That although the greatest obstacle to the project's success is NWC's capacity to reduce non-revenue water, the NRW reduction program on which NWC has embarked suggests that it has a good chance of achieving a target set if it can maintain the schedule of activities as set out by the project planners. We also continue to monitor NWC's NRW activities in St. Catherine, which has been reported to be registering NRW losses well below 50%. All of this should bode well for the proposed island-wide NRW project, which we are told is currently at the procurement stage. I should mention as well that based on inquiries coming into our Consumer and Public Affairs unit, we embark on a limited public education campaign in 2025, in March this year, to create better awareness of how matters involving the NWC can be addressed. This included meeting with media houses one-on-one and providing information on our radio program and social media and in print media. We have received good feedback on this and are contemplating making this a regular exercise in our annual calendar of activities. So there seemed to have been a little bit of a particular problem with NWC customers and the concern about how they were to have their complaints addressed. In the electricity sector, our technocrats work with the generation procurement entity and MSET to bring to market another 100 megawatt of renewable capacity. This was successfully awarded during the year at what everyone agreed was a good rate. The facility is now in the construction phase. We're also doubling down on the importance of increasing the reliability and resilience of the country's electricity infrastructure. And in this regard, we're supportive of a number of the actions and initiatives taken and being contemplated by the system operator to harden its infrastructure, its network. I pause here, of course, to point out that this will involve significant cost outlays And given our already high cost of electricity, this will need to be strategic, selective, and somewhat incremental. We are insisting, however, that the more obvious and perhaps less costly maintenance activities, for example, vegetation management, be attended to with diligence. Turning quickly to ICT and some of the matters I've already mentioned, but I'd mention just one more. We continue our work during the year to execute the quality of service reporting obligations for operators in the telecommunications sector. After a number of requests for extensions and clarification, we expect that the first set of reports should be published early in the new fiscal year, which will allow customers to make their own judgment about the quality of service that they are being provided with and the fidelity with which the providers are holding to what they have promised in terms of service delivery. Consumer initiatives, we recently visited revised the guaranteed standard for JPS and NWC. We're now turning our attention to guaranteed standards for small or private water and sewage service providers. There are approximately 17 such licensees who provide service to specific areas as stipulated in their licenses. While the JS scheme is in place for each small, while there are JS schemes in place for each small provider, there are commonalities among the schemes, and we're seeking to create greater alignment among them. I also cannot end without noting that JPS recently announced that it will be resuming some face-to-face contact with its customers in Portmore. While it is not a full store, the MyJPS Care Hub will be housed inside the Fontana Pharmacy in Portmore Pines, offering customers the ability to address key service needs, including account setups, billing queries, digital support, and other frequently requested services. This is heartening for us, as we too would have been getting complaints over the years about the absence of JPS stores or face-to-face facilities in some parishes, which impacted the customer's experience, especially in the aftermath of Beryl. We encourage JPS to consider similar setups in other parishes. Indeed, on a personal note, just last week I was accosted in St. Elizabeth about the absence of a JPS customer-facing facility in that parish. I should also advise that before I take my seat, that this year Jamaica will be host to the Organization of Caribbean Utility Regulators annual conference. The conference will be held in October and will see regulators converging on Montego Bay from all over the region and elsewhere in the world to exchange ideas, share experiences, and build regulatory capacities. The OUR has had the honor of chairing OCR over the last 2 years. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to me. I look forward to listening to the panel discussion and answering any questions that are posed specifically for the OUR. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ansad. And as Ansad says, we're looking forward to any questions that you may have for him following the panel discussion, whether it's pertaining to the OUR's performance during Beryl or any other matter he may have raised. At this time, I invite our panelists and our moderator to take the stage. And while they do, we just want to recognize persons online because we don't want them to feel ignored. So we do have some of our regional regulatory partners who are here in the form of, for example, the Eastern Caribbean Telecommunications Authority. We also have Manchester represented in the form of the Manchester Parish Development Committee. Anthony Freckleton, welcome. ODPEM, I know the ODPEM Director General has joined us, but we know we also have ODPEM online. And we have quite a number of other persons. We invite you just to quickly put it in the chat. Trelawney is also represented. The Custos office in Trelawney is also represented online. So we're very heartened that our stakeholders from outside of the corporate area, outside of Jamaica, have felt it worthwhile to be here today. Can we get a nice round of applause for them? as we welcome them online. I do have the Wi-Fi information, but I've withheld it for so long that I'm not sure it's still necessary. But for those who need it, its username is OUR88, password is OUR88, all lowercase. Just look for Jamaica Pegasus Banqueting. All right, so I'm going to leave it up to my panelists. All right, so without further, I know many of you are here today, partly because of the panel discussion. So I hand over to Kalila Reynolds, and she is the CEO of Money Media Limited, who will be moderating the panel discussion. Kalila.
Thank you very much, Liz, and good morning to everyone in the room. Oh, this is a very hearty good morning. I can tell you all have eaten now. You've eaten since our prayer this morning. It's good to hear you with full bellies and a full room. Also to our people joining us online on Zoom, good morning once again. And to our panelists, our esteemed panelists, this is a very important topic. The Deputy Director General reminded us in her remarks this morning that it's been 9 months since Hurricane Beryl. And more importantly, 2 months until the next hurricane season. And when she said that, I jumped. I said, wow. 2 months, the next hurricane season is about to start already. It is already upon us, which means that we need to be making plans today. And so this forum is very timely because now we get to assess the impact of Hurricane Beryl with our utility providers and learn the lessons that we need to apply to the next hurricane season, which is directly upon us. Now, who in the room was affected by Hurricane Beryl? You say everybody, but I'm only seeing about half the room raising their hands. I know Kingston was largely spared, but for those of us outside Kingston, we heard in the remarks as well, 65% of the island lost electricity. And I can tell you, I live in Mandeville Town in Manchester Parish. And when Hurricane Beryl was coming, I said, oh, we should be fine because we're up in the hills. We are fairly secure. We have a secure property. And I remember that day we lost power at about 11 a.m. And at the end of the storm, we did the assessment on the house and the property. The house held up fairly well, not much damage. We didn't even have a leak. Our banana trees blew down, sure, but I thought we were fine. Little did I know it would be 4 weeks until we got electricity back. 4 weeks. And for me, who I run my business out of my home, this means lost income, missed opportunities, additional expense to try to get somewhere that has electricity and internet so I can run my business. And imagine other people and other businesses who have much larger scale operations than I do. And so the remarks hit me just now about redundancy and about the things that we need to learn. And so we're going to start our presentation today, or our discussion today, with presentations from each of the 4 utilities here. And let me just introduce our panel. We have with us Hugh Grant, the President and CEO of JPS. Also with us is Herman Fagan, the Vice President of Operations, acting at the National Water Commission. We also have here Stephen Price, Vice President and General Manager of Flow, and the other Stephen Murad, the CEO of Digicel. And we're going to start with presentations from each, and I think it is quite appropriate that we ask JPS to make the first presentation. That's Hugh Grant. Given that everything depends on electricity. So Hugh, you're up first. And each of them will speak for 10 minutes. And after that, we begin our open discussion.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm excited whenever they say JPS is going first and we get a round of applause. I like that. So thank you very much for that. So I said I'm Hugh Grant, the President and CEO of JPS, and it's a pleasure for me to be here this morning to interact and engage with you all. I started this role in August 1st of last year, approximately 1 month after the passage of Hurricane Beryl to our island. Some people may say it has been baptism by fire, baptism by hurricane, baptism by water, no pun intended. And while there is some element of truth to that, one very good thing is it also afforded me an opportunity for accelerated learning of the system, accelerated learning of the people, and very, very, very importantly, accelerated learning of the stakeholder landscape here in Jamaica. Prior to returning to this role, I was away from Jamaica for approximately 30 years. 25 of those 30 years, I worked at the energy company in New York City, whereby I assumed positions of increasing responsibilities over the year, whereby in my latter years, I was an executive there. As one can imagine, working in New York City for the energy provider, there are high stakes involved. And while there, I had an opportunity to be exposed to a lot. I've worked in the generation sector, I've worked in transmission, I've worked in distribution, and we also have a steam business there that I run. So I've seen a gamut of the energy industry. I had an opportunity to lead and be a critical part of the response to Superstorm Sandy in 2012. How many folks here remember Superstorm Sandy 2012? Yeah. And there, it was a tremendous impact to New York City, whereby approximately 1 million customers were out. And if one can imagine, those customers were in downtown Manhattan. And there you had customers such as the New York Stock Exchange, arguably the financial capital of the world. You had Empire State Building. You had the entire subway system downtown. So in New York, you have an underground infrastructure that's dependent on power. And then, of course, you also have all these high-rise buildings that's depending on power. So I understand what it means to lead through emergencies, and I understand the stakes are high. The one thing I can say is, since coming back to Jamaica, I'm really encouraged by the dedication and the hard work by the men and women of JPS. Now, Hurricane Beryl occurred, and what are some of the significant learnings coming from that? One thing that we clearly see, and it was mentioned here earlier, is that given the electricity-centered nature of our lifestyles, the dependency on digitization and access to information, there is very little appetite for extended duration outages. Ansard mentioned social media and other platforms, and people want everything instantaneously. We heard mention made earlier of, in 1988, Gilbert. There, it took approximately 3 months for the system to be restored. And I can tell you this, I was in Jamaica then, and the public outcry then was nothing like what we saw in Beryl, whereby the restoration was faster. Just indicative of what's happening, and I heard someone mention social media. You're so right. The other thing that I'll mention is that we see whereby vegetation management is extremely important. And frankly, over the years, there have been several philosophies in regards to vegetation management. One such philosophy is having covered conductors. So if a tree grows and it makes contact with a line, there are no outages because the conductors are covered. But one of the big learnings, of course, in a hurricane is the trees are not growing, they're actually down, and they're tearing down the line. So we have taken a hard look at our vegetation management policy, and we have a significant shift in terms of how we're going to approach that, and I'll share more around that. The other thing is a paradigm shift that we have done in terms of having boots on the ground before the storm hits. Typically, how it's done is, hurricane comes, mobilize, assess damage, and if additional resources are required, we then go out and we get additional resources. We at JPS, we have had a paradigm shift in this regard, whereby we are currently engaging around having retainer contracts in place so that on a preemptive basis, we can have boots on the ground based on the forecasted impact. And these boots on the ground, we're talking about overseas line workers, so we can mobilize once we have the all clear and once it's safe and immediately begin restoration efforts. That's a huge difference and a huge shift, and frankly, it's what best in class and first class looks like in terms of responding to a hurricane. Just to put it in perspective, just with Beryl, we had in the order of, say, just under 50 mutual aid workers coming from other Caribbean communities and some places in North America. We're looking to have the capacity and capabilities of up to, like, say, 300. Huge shift, huge difference. And we'll be in dialogue with our dear friends, the OUR, in terms of what does it look like in terms of how do we fund this and how do we recover to ensure that we can maintain our critical supplies. The other big thing that we learned is really an opportunity for stronger stakeholder engagement. We were not tightly coordinated with many external agencies as we should, and there are lots of opportunities for efficiencies there. And we'll speak some more in terms of some of the efforts that's done to improve that, as I think we are way ahead compared to where we were last year in terms of those particular efforts. We here at JPS have realized that we need to improve in terms of our stakeholder engagement and how we are engaging key stakeholders. When I say key stakeholders, I make reference to the municipal organizations, the emergency committees within the various parishes, whereby on a blue sky day, we have to establish those relationships. We have to have window in terms of what are some of the critical loads or critical sites within your constituencies, and what can we do to have that inform our restoration priorities in regards to how we restore. We did quite a significant amount of that on the second half of Beryl in St. Elizabeth, whereby we worked closely with Mayor Salmon and his team, and it worked great, lots of learnings, and it really paid dividends. So we're looking to do more in that. We already started, and we'll continue to build on that, because we are committed to having the center of all we do being the customer, and having that perspective, especially in emergency response, to understand how we prioritize given that perspective is extremely important. For example, you may have a community center that's serving as a disaster shelter for the aged and others. Bringing power to that site is extremely important, as many folks in the community, though may not have power at home, may be coming to this particular location. And hence, it can serve the community well. So we want to make sure that we have those type of things on our radar, and we're looking to do that. We also understand that the importance of restoration to economic centers throughout the island, so we can get the commercial space up and running as safely and as timely as possible. And these are some of the things that we'll have inform our restoration plans in terms of how we go ahead and we go forward. Frankly, many of the things that I've spoken about, we're not just talking the talk, we're walking the walk. We've already made great progress in the implementation of many of these things. Some of these systems were tested in Raphael, nothing to the extent of Beryl, but a storm nevertheless, whereby customers were out, and we exercised some of these improvements, and we continue to capture the lessons learned and continue to iterate and continue to do better. So as we prepare for hurricane season for this year, what are some of the significant things that we're doing differently? First, I'll say we revamped our entire emergency response structure. We implemented a best-in-class incident command structure which streamlines the entire restoration process. What that does is you have dedicated incident command. We have a liaison arm dedicated coming into that incident commander. That's a liaison arm for stakeholder engagement. That liaison arm will be engaging with all the municipal organizations, government agencies, OUR, my telecom providers to my left and right, Water Commission, health, and other key stakeholders. It's extremely important that we have that established to bring that perspective and lens into our incident command to inform us in terms of how we are executing and how we are prioritizing our execution. This is frankly something that we did the second half of Beryl in St. Elizabeth. And if we all remember there, we came in 3 days ahead of schedule as a result of implementing that. The other thing that we have done in JPS is everyone now has a storm role. Everyone has a storm role and everyone is being trained on a storm role. One of the important things whenever you have a hurricane is to have damage assessment properly done. To do damage assessment, you need resources, and we are also leveraging technology such as drones to help with damage assessment, especially in areas that are not easily accessible. We're very much on the way in doing that. The other thing that we have done is we have integrated technology into our damage assessment, whereby through mobile applications, we're able to take pictures and have that feed into our necessary systems so we can create the appropriate job plans, have it properly resourced so we can safely and timely execute. That is a game changer. Part of that incident command structure, we now have centralized planning and centralized operations working with the various regions, for which we have broken up into zones and will inform us in terms of the priorities, the resources, and how we execute. The other key thing that does is it enables us to have realistic estimated times of restoration. We fully get it and we fully understand that when there's a hurricane, everybody wants to know, and the lights are out, when is it that the lights are going to come back? However, it's very important that as we do that, we ensure that we have a damage assessment done so that we can understand the extent of the damage, and then you can properly go ahead and estimate restoration times. Another big success is inventory management. This is one thing, frankly, that we got right during Beryl. We had over 20,000 equipment being damaged, and at no point was lack of equipment a critical path to our restoration. So kudos to the team for that. I spoke about vegetation management. We have revamped that. The issue we have had is we have lower tiered contractors who are not able to execute at the level in terms of quality that we're required. We have revamped that, whereby we now have less higher tiered contractors. We have incentivized longer term contracts so we can get higher quality in the execution of that regard. So as I close, one of the key things I want to share is we're doing a drill on Monday of next week. And this drill is a drill with other key stakeholders such as utilities, Water Commission, and we're also including ODPIN and others. This is an example of us not talking the talk, but being aligned, being collaborated, and working together for the greater good so we can have one common voice speaking to how we execute. The last thing I'll share is there's a great opportunity here in Jamaica to have stronger stakeholder engagement and stronger alignment in the midst or the aftermath of a hurricane. What I saw personally was finger pointing from our stakeholders and us trying to figure out who can be the first for a press release. That's unacceptable, and we owe it better to this great nation and the communities we serve that we're aligned in a unified voice with the community and the nation being the core of the vested interest to inform us in terms of how we go forward. With that being said, the incident command structure is one structure that lends itself to an interagency command structure whereby my vision is after we have a hurricane, we'll have the political constituents, we'll have fire, we'll have JDF, we'll have OUR, we'll have all utilities stand in one unified command and address the nation in terms of what are we seeing, what are our priorities, and how we go forward. That's how I've done it in New York. That's what best in class looks like, and that's what facilitates safe and timely restoration of power and other critical facilities in the heart of a hurricane. With that, I will just go ahead and thank you for listening. I look forward to the panel discussion whereby we'll further engage, and thank you all.
Very much. Thank you very much, Hugh. I'm sure there will be many questions directed your way, given that JPS took the most heat following Beryl. Next up, we're going to hear from the National Water Commission. We have Herman Fagan, the Acting VP of Operations.
Thank you, host moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. No man, breakfast has been served already, so I'm just so better than that. Right, and the fact that water is on the floor, it's actually more energy. And maybe it is only fitting for water to fall on light, knowing that water is dependent on light to deliver services you. All right, water and wastewater systems worldwide are highly vulnerable to extreme weather conditions such as hurricane. And that is primarily because of where the water sources are located, makes them very high risk. We have over 420 different distribution systems, which is 160 underground wells and 260 surface water systems. So these surface water systems are susceptible to flooding, block intakes, etc., whenever there is any adverse weather condition. It's very important for us to kind of give some kind of context or background as to what goes in the planning stage before the advent of an hurricane. Director General, you spoke earlier about the 42 hours time period that we had before Beryl hit us. So one of the things that we have to do is to inspect our critical infrastructure. If there are major repairs on the way, we try to expedite those. Restoration of our systems that are out of operation. The restocking of fuels at critical facilities to include generators is one of the steps that have been taken. Importantly and significantly, the discussion has been had with our suppliers and our contractors because they play a pivotal role certainly in terms of us providing service. Increasing and replenishing of our storage tanks is also of paramount importance for two reasons. One, to ensure that there is service available after the hurricane, and to ensure that during the hurricane, they don't get damaged. In the corporate area, for example, during Beryl, there was actual water restriction and those were immediately lifted. What do we do after the hurricane? We have to deploy our teams to inspect our critical infrastructures, which include intakes, pumping station, reservoir, distribution, network, etc. To go into the meat of the matter, the summary of Hurricane Beryl, 330 of our water supply and wastewater facilities were impacted. And that equates to maybe about 385,000 households. And if we are supposed to do an extrapolation, that is, let's say four people per household, that is in excess of 1.5 million people or residents who would have been impacted. The mostly affected parishes were the southern parishes, as we all know. I see the Member of Parliament for Manchester is with us. Manchester, St. Elizabeth, Westmoreland, and Clarendon were adversely impacted. The extent of damage ranged from dislocation pipeline, damage to buildings, heavy siltation at intakes, block roads, and high turbidity, which is a feature of heavy rainfall. Notwithstanding, here in Kingston and St. Andrew, the two major facilities were operational during the storm itself. Also, we have a main treatment plant in St. Anne that's both, that was basically operational. So after the hurricane, within the first 5 days, we were able to bring back or give back service to 192,500 customers. I think that is very significant. So we removed 70% were impacted. So we moved from 30% to 65 within 1 to 5 days. Within 6 to 10 days, we were able to add a further 300,000 customers. So the total number within the first 10 days was 464,000. So that is 85%. The other 15% was primarily because of the fact that the JPS would have been significantly impacted. So there were power supply issues. Having said all of that, there are a number of takeaways, a number of considerations, a number of things as a utility that when we look at it, we say, okay, in post-mortem, this could have been done differently, or in hindsight. I raised the issue with respect to generators, and DG, you spoke about it earlier. Most of our critical facilities are outfitted with generators. Most of our critical facilities. Hence the reason why, for example, I spoke about those in Kingston and St. Andrew were able to operate during the hurricane itself. We would want to have generators installed primarily at maybe most, if not all, the locations. This is just not practical. And DG, you spoke earlier about the issue of theft and security, which is a real problem. But one of the challenges that we really had, and that we have to focus on going forward is replenishing these generators. So we have, for example, a system which is basically rural and is running for a period of time, is to ensuring that we get it replenished in a timely fashion or in a timely manner so that the customer supplies is not disrupted. In instances where we were impacted by our mobility and the systems, those generators are not replenished, it causes hands with the customer. So that is something that that is basically one takeaway. Additionally, despite the fact that we would have had discussion with our suppliers and our contractors with respect to heavy duty equipment, I think going forward, maybe one of the things that we'll have to do is to ensure that some of those equipment are deployed strategically. So after the hurricane itself, we are able to execute and to undertake certain activities in a very timely and in a very quick fashion. What are some of the things that we are basically doing? Earlier, the issue of communication came to the fore. And in an era where there's instant communication, social media, etc., I believe in the post-mortem discussion that we have is to ensure that the communication is done in a more coordinated and in a more seamless way. One of the challenges that we had in that regard is because of our ability to communicate. The challenges also that were faced by the two telecom service providers. So connectivity was an issue. So that is one issue or one aspect that we really needed to look at. Our main service provider, we would have communicated, a priority listing, but after the advent of the hurricane, everybody wanted their supplies and their systems each to be put back. So we now have established a priority listing for each parish. And we are saying to our colleagues that this is the priority listing. So in the advent of a hurricane, this is basically what seeks precedent. Critical stock items, we had stock items in our inventory, but in the aftermath, we recognize that there are certain other items, some of which have to be imported from overseas. So during the season itself, one of the things I've said to my CFO is that we have to basically have those items stocked away and say these are in preparation for the hurricane itself. Our business continuity plan, I'm checking my time. Our business continuity plan was activated immediately, and it came after the hurricane itself. And that business continuity plan, they were already in readiness testing phase. What does that mean? We're not only testing our ability to be responsive after hurricane, but any other disruptive events. In fact, we're now testing maybe about 7 disruptive events. How do we ensure that critical business functions and operations are undertaken in the advent of this? We did it against the background, some of the learnings from Beryl itself. So we know, for example, who our primary responding staff are. In an event, those primary staff cannot be reached. Let's say for a Mona treatment plant, who are the alternative staff. So even if we don't have connectivity and communication, the operational team knows specifically what the different roles are. We are far ahead in the process. Would have had seminars with all the operation teams across the length and breadth of the country. We are now in simulation stage where we are basically testing certain activities. So the business continuity plan would be a feature going forward. My two last point would be the use of wayside tanks, and I know this is very important, particularly for the political stakeholders. One of the challenges that we find is that though we did extensive trucking because of the accessibility issues that we had, we really could not go into somebody's nook and cranny. So one of the strategies going forward is to have temporary tanks set up at various locations where people can come in, MP, to get potable water. The other thing, which is my final point, the use of technology will play a significant role. My colleague spoke about the uses of drones. We have some very, very remote locations. So the use of the technology will be incorporated, certainly in terms of our post checks, which will enable us to be in a position to make a faster determination as to exactly what obtains. I look forward to the continued discussion and the questions that will come as a result. How did I do, moderator, with my time? 26 seconds.
All right, thank you very much for that great presentation from Herman at the NWC. We're going to move next to Flo. I see Stephen is already testing his mic.
Testing.
He's ready. Stephen Price is the VP and General Manager at Flo. So let's hear his remarks.
Thank you, Khalila. Distinguished guests, it's a great pleasure to be here. I mean, I really want to also, just on behalf of the panel, also recognize our teams that are here within the room, because obviously they have been the warriors of Beryl throughout this process. And I know each of us have our own thanks that we give on a daily basis for what they went through. Not seeing their families, not being with their kids, not even tending to their damages that they had during the hurricane, just to make sure that our consumers were all connected at the end of the day. Our efforts go beyond just the technology. We are deeply invested in the resilience and growth of this nation. Not one of us on this stage, if we're not operating at the optimal levels that we are, can this nation continue to grow, right? So we know the awesome responsibility that comes with our roles in terms of guiding this nation's development. Through continuous improvement and a steadfast focus on preparedness and growth, we strive to be a pillar of support in times of need and a catalyst for progress. I think I use my 10 minutes to really share a heartfelt story of resilience, preparation, and community spirit. Just to reflect how we at Flow Jamaica responded to the challenge faced by Hurricane Beryl. I think what we want to make sure everybody understands, business continuity management is a part of the fabric of our daily operations in any of these utilities. Before this even happened, the hurricane season began, we had already gone through 2 business simulation events around hurricanes. One on our own and a regional business simulation event across our other markets across the Caribbean. Because what happens for us within the Flow environment and potentially the digital environment as well is that one hurricane comes through, but it hits a number of us on the way through, right? So it's part of and parcel of what we're doing. And even the stuff that we're now going to move forward with in the coming months next week, Monday, with Hugh and the team and all the other utilities, we're absolutely proud to add that additional layer. So, okay, should we stand at attention? All right. In our preparation activities, first things that we normally do, identifying, reporting all the potential threats that we do see. Vegetation management, those things come into play. We look at the risks in terms of redundancy. We want to make sure that we are as strong as can be. We go through our hurricane simulation events, We make sure that we look at our whole backup power supply. Enough has been said in terms of the challenges that we face. You can't roll out generators everywhere. Neither can you service generators everywhere. Neither can you secure generators everywhere, right? So that's one of the things that we made sure to have our decision tree around where we placed and where we were fully backed up. I will say Michael Brown, who is here with me, my director of technology, it's a significant focus of everything that we do to make sure that we have resiliency in every single part of our network. And the good thing about our organization is because we are a regional organization, we have the support of our regional networks in terms of making sure that we're able to really continue and that the network is able to operate continuously throughout an event and recover after an event if there's damage. So what have we learned? Power management. Obviously, we realize that the importance of having a clear power restoration plan and a power restoration plan that's communicated and understood between us and all our stakeholders. I'm happy to share that really during this crisis, we created the synergies which continue today and really deepened our relationships with Hugh and his team over the period. And I must continue to say that the level of partnership that has prevailed since the event has been wondrous, remarkable, and we have to commend each other for just what we've been able to do in that space. It's a reminder that, especially in times of crisis, we have a little more in common than we think that we do, right? The other piece of the puzzle was vendor management, manpower and equipment. I think one of the things that we take for granted, and I mean, I see Wayne here, and he's looking at productivity and all these things, but skill set flight is a significant challenge that's facing ICT and the sectors we operate in. And that's something that we face every year, where every single year, many professionals leave for greener pastures as they see it. So it's not just health sector or the education sector. The ICT sector is one that's under siege as well in that space. I think for us, what we made sure to do, even though we had contracts with many suppliers, it's also common to find that many of the support suppliers also service all of us here at this table. So it's also a competition for resources in the market as well, which is also a challenge. I think what we have learned, and it's key for us, we are utilizing resources from across the region. At the aftermath of Beryl, we had several teams that came in from Panama and Costa Rica who helped us with boots on the ground in terms of the restoration effort. So it's key to the resilience of having a regional network. So that's really one of our backup plans that we have. It's a more long-term engagement to be able to move personnel from various territories to the market in order to support that. So, and we also have a good relationship with many of the hospitality suppliers in Kingston and across the island who have helped us in that regard. This big one here, theft and damage to our equipment. It's still a big bother for us, and each of us at a stage. I know Ansel has spoken really at detail, and we thank him for the continued support. But I think we've been talking for years now. It's time to move from talk shops to real action, legislation, and punitive actions against these players. For me, we don't have a scrap metal industry. We have a scrap metal opportunity in this country, right? So sometimes we have to have a real sit down and be practical about the things that are happening in our country. Not only is it telecoms equipment, power equipment, equipment supporting the water network. It's critical infrastructure, railings off bridges. All of these things are being lost on a day-to-day basis. And if we don't do something about it, it will end up in anarchy. So we have to really act. And we've been speaking for umpteen years now, things must change. And just to make everybody understand, theft doesn't just mean copper cables. Theft means all of a generator disappearing overnight. It means fuel disappearing, right? It means copper cables and copper bars and parts of towers, which is public safety, being removed. It's so much that's happening, guys. So please continue to lobby on behalf of each and every one of us. We have to get some meaningful change. I think the other place I'd like to touch is the day after logistics. The damage assessment required physical presence, as everyone has said so far. We use drones, we use physical site or network of employees right across the country to help us in that process. But we can't move until our Deputy Director General here of ODPEM tells me I have the all clear, right? So when I get the all clear is when I'm able to move my resources in order to do that, right? Ensuring that the safety of our team remained our top priority. We also ensured the well-being of our technical crews in the face of delays due to road closures, flooding, and other unsafe travel conditions. I think some of the thing is we will also start to look at heavy equipment in terms of how we clear paths for ourselves as well, even as the NWA is doing their thing as well, because the timelines that the customers give us are totally different from what we expect, you know? So we have to really drive on that. The other things I would like to say is that the resilient stuff that we've done from a company perspective, we are moving more of our infrastructure underground. Really expensive to do that. In some instances, in some areas, it's almost $1,200 per home to move infrastructure underground. So I want you to understand the kind of proposition that's there. We are relocating as we speak 172 kilometers of aerial fiber between Maypen and St. James as we speak, as we prepare for the hurricane. So that's clear. We've improved our logical redundancy, right? On-island redundancy between major hub sites. We've done a lot of changes there in that space. We've added 142 generators. We have probably about 80 more on site that we're rolling out as well. We have solar systems at circa somewhere around 200 of our sites already. But at the same time, we are going to communicate better. And with a coordinated effort between all of us and the government agencies involved with business continuity management, I think we'll be able to do a lot better. I think the other piece of the puzzle that I just want to close off with is one of the key things that we also recognize: to whom much has been given, much is expected. And I think one of the things as well in the advent of the storm that JPS, NWC, Digicel, ourselves did is the humanitarian efforts. And it's one of the things that I'm very proud of in terms of even in the crisis, we had to also make sure that we looked at the crisis of others and made sure that we supported them. But I look forward to your questions. Hand over to.
Thank you very much, Stephen. We'll move right along into our final presentation, and that's from Stephen Murad at Digicel, CEO of Digicel.
Morning. Let all protocols be observed. It's a great honour and a privilege to be here among some of the industry leaders, and I just thought I really wanted to share that. But firstly, normally if I come up and give a presentation, I normally leave the thanks at the end, but I think it's important that the first thing I do is thank the millions of Digicel customers and the loyalty that they have. And in particular, we think back at times of natural crises, and I even mentioned to our colleagues on the table that like the COVID years seem to be, it never really happened, you know, and natural disasters, we forget about them quickly. And I think what Jamaica has done since the first time we went to the cabinet meeting, then we went to Parliament, and obviously to answering the team, I thank you for keep bringing this to the furore. I think it's really important. So yes, I want to thank all of our customers for their patience and efforts through very difficult times. In particular, it's very close to my heart. So St. Elizabeth, in particular, Parity is actually the place where I got married. So when I was down there on the ground with the people there and seeing the devastation, and Stephen touched on it, I think it's important that we also celebrate some of the things that went really well. All of the foundations and our Pia, Charmaine and the team, we came together not as, yes, I mean, Stephen might, you don't have to be called Stephen to run a telecoms operator in Jamaica. I didn't change it by default, just to be clear. Yes, he's an Arsenal fan and a Man United fan, and we might fight all day long, but we obviously have a competitive slant in our customer base, absolutely, because that's what makes it brilliant for us, that we're rubbing together to how can we give the best experience. But that went out the window. We came together, we were on the ground the next day, and to see the devastation brought me back. I have been through probably 4 Category 5s in the Caribbean, multiple Category 3s when I was the regional CEO of Digicel. So 2017 really reminds me of the 14 stitches I have in the back of my head from the hurricane in Turks. Like an idiot, I decided to try and go out there in a hurricane. British people don't know anything about hurricanes. I apologise. There was a fire. I thought I'd get a fire extinguisher. The fire extinguisher leapt out of my hand and hit me on the back of the head. I will show the pictures round for anyone who wants to see it later. So it has taught me a lot. Bermuda gets a weather storm every single year, repeatedly. Yes, the infrastructure is very different. Pretty much everything is underground, as I was explaining into you, because the place is so small. So having gone through those incidents and being on the ground, and my mother and father-in-law still live in Mandeville and repeatedly gave me a hard time, as you can imagine, when Stephen. So not an easy audience to appease, I can promise you, definitely. But I really wanted to celebrate some of those amazing things. Communication. Yes, Hugh and Stephen would have touched on that. Absolutely, we can do better. But I think there's some amazing things that happened. Overnight, historically, we've not had a good combined communication. Overnight, we set up what I determined a war room. Whilst, forgive the analogy, but I felt like we were in a war, we were in a crisis. And how do we coordinate better? What we were able to do, and also Blaine has come in as well from JPS, and Mikey and beyond, the key CTIOs of the major utilities are in this room today, and the way that the teams coordinated, geolocations, site down, sharing information quickly. We need to get on this quickly. It's a key dependent. Where are your key sites? That actually went really well. I don't mind telling you. Yes, it doesn't determine a wave. It may have taken us a lot longer to restore the country, but I can promise you it was no uncomfortable conversations were had. Everybody challenged each other to how do we get the country back to where it needs to be. The country's come too far in the last number of years to really damage the economy. It's been touched on. People's attitudes have changed. Your business model is that I need to be able to work from home every single day. The internet has changed all of that. That is already bolted. So if we don't provide what our core business is, which is telecoms and internet connectivity, then the country will invariably grind to a halt, which only a few weeks ago pretty much happened. Stephen has touched on it. And again, I've been like a bit of a broken record talking about the punitive measures need to justify the minority that still thinks it's okay to go and try and make a quick dollar or whatever it is, the impact that minority has. So yes, industry leaders play a huge part. We need to, hold governments accountable, absolutely. But don't disguise away from the fact that the general public plays a massive part of censoring the foolishness, bad-minding behaviour that happens, or forgive my attempt to pass my teething of light or anything else that can come along. I've been practicing for 10 years, so forgive me. My wife will kill me after this. So I think it's really important that the general public's, don't wait for the JCF or the JDF. The general public plays a massive part in society. I think, our trust in God and what that means is critical. And we really need to pray for our society every single day that we can do better. I always say to my mother, who's still in the UK, because she's become the best public servant of Jamaica, she's retired, so she watches every essence of news. I always say we border on being brilliant every single day. Every single day. It is my, forgive me, Mr. Bartley will be happy that I'm like a tourism announcement for Jamaica. It is the most amazing place in the world, and we need to keep pushing ourselves to be there. But also, what have we done differently? So I committed to the PM and the Cabinet that we'll invest in alternative protection of our network. So we would have announced yesterday. So I signed an RFP to install solar, like Stephen touched on as well. Again, adds another layer of protection. Our partnership with Hugh and Blaine and Rick and the team is cemented forever. We absolutely need the national grid to work every single day. Our networks are living, breathing infrastructures. They're a living, breathing entity. We don't wait for the 1st of June to wake up and go, well, we must prepare for the hurricane. Every single day, things are happening every single day to make that living, breathing entity. It's like when you go to the doctors. You need a health check every single day. Technology has aided that, but you still need boots on the ground. I'm very lucky. I have about 1,000 people that's directly employed by the Jamaican business. So I have a huge team on the ground. And then indirectly, I probably have another 1,000 people that every day wake up and think about the Digicel customers in their drive to work, going fixing the network, managing incidents. I'm very lucky, absolutely. And then I also have the added, depends on how you look at incentive of having the group business 2 floors above me. Stephen can probably relate to that. So you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. But they are here on the ground helping the Jamaican business every day. It's where we started on the 19th of April, 2001. We're almost 24 years in Jamaica, and we have a huge wealth of support. And then obviously the 25 operating companies that we have around the region. We unfortunately have become experts in crisis management, whether it be earthquakes, if you think of what's happened in places like Haiti as well, how we react and manage crisis situations. Whilst you might not think that's in the job description, nobody blinks an eye in Digicel about how can we support our colleagues around the region as well. So Stephen touched on it. When a hurricane passes through, sometimes it passes through, and in my experience, it's also come back and hit you again. We've seen that also around the region. So buying more generators absolutely is critical that we've done that as well. So we installed another 77 a couple of months ago. But it's like a Formula One car. Can you imagine trying to change the wheel at 200 miles an hour to make sure that the wheels don't fall off and the driver crashes? That's what it's like running these businesses, whether you're up in, in Herman's business, Hugh's business, or Stephen's business. That's what we have to do. And that's why our teams are a phenomenal success of what they do. But there'll be challenges. And I think, we'll always be first to put up our hand up and say, we've not got it right. We need to do better. Absolutely. We hold a mirror against ourselves every single day. That war room mentality is only about making it better for the customer. So they're the critical things that we've done differently. There's some, obviously that rollout of solar will be a critical help and support for the future of managing that living, breathing entity. So significant change has happened. We are investing in future rollout of fibre across the island as well to help and support that connectivity. So small businesses, entrepreneurship, it never amazes me every single day. So if anybody's got any time around the 3rd to the 6th of April, the JMA are hosting a huge event, in particular around small businesses of Jamaica and helping that grow. So please pop along. I think it'll be a phenomenal event of how can you make yourself global when you might see yourself as local. So I thank everybody again, and I'll hand you back.
Thank you very much. Now, in the interest of time, because I realize we are at 9:26 and this was scheduled to end at 9:30, we can jump straight into the questions if you like from the audience. We have people on Zoom. We have a question here in the front, so let me go directly to you. Do we have a mic for the audience?
All right, good morning, everyone. Richard Thompson, let me identify myself. Richard Thompson, Director General at the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management. Just a few comments, no question. Quickly, as quickly as possible. Addressing you's idea around incident command system, just to say that exists. We have probably the most robust disaster management system in the wider Americas. And in terms of our command system, we have what is called the National Emergency Operations Center. And we have an extensive risk management framework, and we have a council, a National Disaster Risk Management Council, that is chaired by the Prime Minister. So that does exist. So what we have to do in peacetime, that's what I said to my team always at the ODPEM, we have two times how now we operate. Wartime and peacetime. Your wartime is when you're responding to incidents. So in peacetime, what we need to do is to ensure that everyone who is a part of the overall national process have a full understanding as to how the system works. So in that way, you avoid confusion in times of disasters when everything needs to work properly. In terms of what Stephen had said, the other Stephen, my brother from Flow, is that what they are doing now is doing subterranean infrastructure. Because what we have for our operation in Jamaica is a single point of failure, which is power. The question is coming, which we have been talking about it for years. Where is JPS in terms of we're going to subterranean infrastructure? That point. And to the other Stephen, my next good friend from Digicel, it's all good and well when we talk about modernizing our infrastructure and looking at solar. Your solar panel will go in a Cat 5. They will go in a Cat 4. Now you would have to look at your management system as to how you deal with that whenever time you're prepping for an event. Because try as you may, there are places that had solar panel that went in Beryl. So you have to manage that as well. But the best part in looking at those single points of failure is subterranean infrastructure, which we really have to invest in. It's expensive, but you have to look at it in terms of phasing infrastructure like that. Thank you very much.
No, thanks for your comments, and I'll address the question in terms of having underground infrastructure. So as I said, I came from New York. That's what we have. Over 100,000 miles of underground infrastructure. That's what we have. Here in Jamaica, we have about over 20,000 kilometers of lines. The big issue there is the cost. Underground infrastructure, I know it very well. I've built it and I've operated it. It costs approximately 10 times more than the overhead infrastructure. So the question is cost and who is going to pay for it. We already see the share of the wallet that the bill currently has. So I think we all have to be realistic when we talk about these solutions. What I suggest is a more pragmatic approach whereby we can have selective undergrounding, whereby we identify critical loads and we selectively underground critical loads. Now, what does that look like? We may have hospitals, we may have National Water Commission pumps, we may have some cell sites with my partners here. That is an opportunity that we have to look into, and that's a possibility. But the notion that here in Jamaica, we're going to underground our infrastructure, my friends, is unrealistic. It's not only more than 10x times, but from a maintenance perspective, it also costs a lot more to maintain. It's just not practical, given that we're here in a developing country whereby the GDP per capita is about 6,000 US per capita. It's just not happening, or less than that. I'm being very kind here, as my CFO will tell me. It's just not realistic. So we need pragmatic solutions as we think about and how we go forward.
Okay. Stephen, would you like to add anything as well?
I think I wouldn't disagree with my colleague. Obviously, solar is, I don't know, I made the joke, it's the backup of the backup of the backup. So we have batteries, generators, and solar, and obviously she is a private provider as well. But absolutely, you're correct.
Just to add to that, I think as Stephen said, backup of the backup to the backup. I think we're just trying to put as many layers of redundancy in our sites. Because one of the biggest challenges for us is that we can't get to all the sites because of just the blockages of major arterial routes, etc. So they have to be able to survive on their own for at least some time before roads are opened and all those things.
We have a question here.
I just have one quick comment on the solar. We here at JPS, we strongly support a clean energy future, and we're all here to unlock those opportunities. The one thing I would say, I want us to think about what happened during Hurricane Beryl to all the renewable resources when the storm was here. They were all gone. What helped us to restore, after losing 65% of customers, what helped us to restore more than 90% of the customers within 1 week is the fact that we had dispatchable thermal resources that were on that prevented the grid from shutting down. That is a reality. So as we think and we talk about resilience, we have to ensure that we underpin resilience with diverse resources from a both fuel supply perspective and also in regards to what we're doing to reinforce the infrastructure on the grid. We have a grid that's designed for a Category 3 storm. Beryl was a Category 4. So right away, you're faced with conditions that exceeding your design criteria. So part of the messaging ought to be, as we saw in Manchester and St. Elizabeth, that it's not a restoration, it's a rebuild. And with a rebuild is a different reset and a different expectation in how we go forward. And how can we partner to ensure that, one, we're doing things around the resiliency fund, which we're doing in terms of reinforcing the existing infrastructure and grid, putting trip savers and other devices in terms of the laterals to minimize impact. But that has to be a part of the conversation in terms of the resiliency portfolio. What does that look like and how are we executing on that? And the good news is we're doing that and we're looking to do more. And going forward, we're building out for a Category 5. But that's going forward. We still have over 20,000 kilometers that's designed at Category 3. That is our reality.
Well, that's good to hear that you're building up for Category 5 now. Before we take the question from the audience, what do you mean the renewables were all gone? It means we couldn't access them? They weren't. What happened?
That's a great question. The reality is when you have storms, solars, panels, they're impacted. They're not available. Many solar panels have to be removed and be prior to the storm in order to secure those facilities. That's just the reality in terms of solars and intermittent in nature. The same thing in terms of wind turbines. Wind turbines are locked out and secure because they'll take off in flight. So that's a reality in terms of the dynamic of those renewable resources. So what was holding the grid together are the dispatchable resources, which are thermal resources. Frankly, it was some heavy fuel oil, because also here in Jamaica, we have liquefied natural gas, but a big portion of that is from a floating storage barge. That also left and was gone. That's the reality here. So hence, as you saw in the aftermath of Beryl, and I'll be very candid here, we saw whereby we had an increase in the bills because of the change in the fuel mix, because what was here was more expensive fuel to keep the grid together. That's heavy fuel oil and alternate diesel oil. So one of the things that we have to do, and we're working to partner with OUR, we need to have some form of market mechanism for fuel stabilization and rate stabilization, given the shock effect that these effects can have. These are all those things. And I'll just share lastly, 60% of our bills, 60% of our bills are passed through fuel charges and independent power producer charges. That's what it is, 60%. So absent of having some form of bill stabilization mechanism, we here at JPS, we have to pay all these fuel providers and all these IPPs who are billing us. We have an obligation to pay. So now we need some mechanism to stabilize in the advent of storms in order to reduce this bill volatility and shock effect.
So as much as we talk about redundancy, our options are still limited. Let's take our question in the back.
Right. A pleasant good morning. I'm Sean Thorpe, the Dean of Engineering and Computing at the University of Technology, Jamaica. I'm now reflecting on Beryl and a very good panel discussion so far. How did you really prioritize the restoration efforts? You had used the term priorities earlier in the conversation. How did you all go about prioritizing, this restoration from where you sit, at the vantage point you sit in your particular companies? Did you have a particular criteria about how you go about doing that? And what were some of the biggest challenges you actually face in expediting the same?
And that question is for everyone?
Well, I'm throwing it out to the panel. I guess anyone
I'll
could
take
take it
two
on.
responses. So let's
Yeah,
hear from the
fair enough.
NWC because we haven't had them yet.
All right, so our priority areas would be particularly the urban centers, and urban centers, primarily have the critical service providers, hospitals, police stations, etc., etc. So that's one. Two are those areas that we are able to get back the system up and running. Those pipelines, for argument's sake, doesn't traverses mountainous terrain. So our ability to get those systems up and running is done pretty quickly. And also the areas which are mostly densely populated, housing scheme, etc., where trucking is just not very practical. So in a nutshell, I would say those are the three base criteria.
Digicel?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So for us, we would have done a coordinated effort, in particular with Hugh and Blaine and the Rick and the team, to make sure we hit the major hubs. So where the largest densely populations are, emergency services, get them back online as quickly as possible. We have a very large generator network and batteries, but generators in particular. So it's about our fuel distribution. So what we learned very quickly, because I'll be honest with you, any tabletop drill never prepared us to how to be a fuel distribution depot. That is not our core business, believe it or not. We had amazing support from, maybe businesses you're aware of like Petcoms, Johnson's, Rubis, and Petrojam really stepped up and helped us and sort of worked hand in hand of how to be a fuel distribution depot. You think about some of the remote locations, you can only access it with a quad bike and a jerry can. That is the reality. But we enabled to place key locations around the country because we just became a fuel depot. That's unbudgeted, I don't mind telling you. So that is a different challenge that we face as business as well. I think I just want to add one last point. I think it'd be good. In my experience of going through multiple hurricanes around the region, where I think there's a great opportunity is if we place critical spurs, not just in Jamaica, but we place them outside of the hurricane belt as well. So we will ship them in as needed. From my experience of working around the region, generally there's an MOU around duty exemptions and waivers to get those large companies, equipment, materials, fibre infrastructure in quickly as well, because that's obviously all unbudgeted. So I urge on looking at, in particular for the Minister of Finance, how we can have some sort of MOU where we need to ship stuff in quickly that isn't already on island, that we've not already paid the duty on. I think it'd be an amazing opportunity to have some MOU like that as well.
We have a question in the front.
Yeah, morning. I'm Xavier Chevans, Chief Engineering Officer at the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation. 2 questions. You can plan for a hurricane as best as possible. You get warnings. We have natural hazards such as earthquakes that don't give you any warnings. Earthquakes and tsunamis. Digicel spoke briefly about their responses to earthquake. I would like a response from Flo as to how you treat with being resilient and how you respond to an earthquake. And 2, the other question for JPS is you say they have a drill sometime soon. I ask if the Jamaica Fire Brigade is a part of that drill. Because during our
We're not hearing you very well. Can you just speak up, please?
Oh, the exercise that you have on Monday, JPS. I was asking if the Jamaica Fire Brigade is a part of that exercise. Because during times of these times and so forth, when you have emergencies and so forth, the Jamaica Fire Brigade plays a critical role on behalf of the government. So the one has to do with earthquake, and the one has to do with your drill in terms of the response of the fire brigade.
I think that second question is a quick answer. Is a yes or no? Is the fire brigade?
Yeah, I would say for that particular drill, it's more an inter-utility drill and working with ODPEN. We also invited key stakeholders. I got to double check if we invited fire, but this drill was more focused on inter-utility and prioritizing restoration. Frankly, coordination with fire and these other organizations, that's a partnership with ODPEN who are to pull all these folks in as we establish and go forward. This is more how can we align as utilities, prioritize on what we do. But we got to partner with ODPEN to bring in all these other agencies. We also brought in National Works Agency to help with clearing of the roads and other things. But we are the ones initiating and moving forward with that kind of action.
Stephen, on earthquakes?
Okay, there you go. So we have fire and JDF. Thank you for that. That's Blaine, my Senior Vice President, Energy Delivery. Outstanding and amazing guy.
So confirming that yes.
Yeah, we all have a lot of love for Blaine, right? On the earthquake, when we speak about business continuity management within our entities, we don't speak just about hurricanes. It's about earthquakes, pandemics, any kind of incident that could affect us, even a major cybercrime kind of incident as well. So we treat that all within our wheelhouse. Especially earthquakes, I would say even last week, Thursday, we just conducted our island-wide drill. Jamaica Fire Brigade was involved, and we went through the regular paces, incident response, injuries, all those kind of things. So we really make it as real life as possible. Our customers in stores have to be involved, all these things. So we have these kind of rigors within the business already. Yeah, man.
Have a question here in the front. It's there's somebody in the back first. Okay.
I'm Peter Clark, the Managing Director of the Water Resources Authority. While Beryl, of course, is topical, and as we said, quite a few Jamaicans, a large number of Jamaicans were impacted. At the end of the day, it's an act of God. And we have to work with that, we have to respond, and we have to plan. But especially for JPS, there's an act of man that is absolutely critical and crucial that also has to be responded to. And that, while Beryl affected maybe 60 or 70% of the population, this affects 100% of your customers, which is the loss of your electricity due to theft. And as far as the man on the ground is concerned, the JPS response has been zero in terms of that. I live in East Rural St. Andrew in the Blue Mountains, and I can identify so many areas where electricity is being stolen, and it didn't start yesterday. The throw-ups didn't go up yesterday. They've been there continuously, and most of us can find and identify them in almost any community that we pass through. And I think that the fact that it's passed off to the paying customers is grossly unfair, and I would strongly suggest that some amount of effort be actually put, because as I say, I'm on the ground and I'm not seeing it because the throats continue. So some effort be actually put into curtailing this activity in a serious way so that the paying customer can feel satisfied.
I'm sure Hugh has a lot to say about that.
Yeah, no, thanks. Thanks for your concern and thanks for sharing your perspective. While very much appreciated, I'll just start by saying your perspective is wrong. And I'll tell you why it's wrong. JPS has an enforcement team that's focused on revenue security. That team goes out each and every day, put their lives at risk. We have police who is out there with us in order to minimize theft. And we have been doing that for years. Just recently, even this year, while being out, they were actually shot at by folks in the community while they were removing throw-ups. So that is what is being done. But more importantly, as we look and as we go forward, we have all realized that theft is not a JPS issue. Theft is a socio-economic issue. And how do you deal with socio-economic issues? You heard my colleagues from Digicel and Flow and Water Commission thought about theft of generators, theft of fuel. So it's prevalent throughout the society. We recently heard that through partnerships with the government, we now have a program that's incentivizing reduction in theft and having more folks regularized. What does that look like? One of the big inhibitors to folks being legalized is the cost of house wiring and getting that house wiring certified so you can safely reduce power. As a result of that, what has JPS done? JPS has partnered with government, and we now have a program that's run by the Jamaica Social Investment Fund, whereby the government is funding this program $1 billion in order to help with the wiring of homes. As part of that program, we have also committed to part of having customers come on board with prepaid services. We have committed to providing 50% of the $4,000 to help incentivize that. So we're paying $240 million to help with that effort. Now, what will that do? By having customers come on board and you're helping them to incentivize them coming on board, because you have folks who never pay at all, is not going to pay. If you can ease that transition, you know, lend yourself to having a more sustainable solution to folks being regularized. We also, just last year and into this year, wired over 101 homes in Riverton. And we're in the process right now of energizing those homes in an effort also to reduce theft. In the interest of time, I could go on and on about that. It's something that is front and center. It's something that we care about, but we also realize that it takes strong partnerships, strong collaboration, and shared perspectives to move the dial on what is a major socio-economic problem here in our great nation.
And let me just add, that is why we have also seen both major political parties making this an issue in the recent budget debates and proposing plans to deal with electricity theft. So we have time for about 2 more questions. I see the Director General of the PIOJ.
So thank you very much, Wayne Henry, and I really should yield to the Member of Parliament. Huh? Okay, but let me congratulate the OUR. I think this is excellent, an excellent discussion. I'm gonna put the hands together. And let me congratulate the panelists. I think just the candor, the vulnerability, the willingness to say, boy, we got it wrong on some things, and really the tone of the conversation, I think, tremendous. When Stephen says, boy, in times of disaster, we have to come together. When you look at evidence, the ability to unite and to partner, as you've said, to partner together is important. And that's one of those critical factors that allow you to recover. Resilience is the ability to bounce back. And I think COVID taught us that you have to widen the perspective of disaster preparedness, because sometimes you think in category 1, 2, 3, not likely 4. The truth is the projections are worsening, right, in terms of what is to come. And your toolkit has to be expanded. I'm heartened to hear about the simulation. I think excellent. All of us at different points, we have to come together. We work together. We do the damage and loss assessment, as you know, at the PIOJ. We do the post-disaster needs assessment. We are not getting the type of information we like from the utilities. And I think we know we are stretched, and that's part of the challenge. You've spoke about capacity. The issue, and my friend said it here, about prioritization. We can't do everything we want to do. We are constrained. As a developing, small island developing state, we are constrained. So you have to have prioritization mechanisms, selection criteria, where you decide what we're going to do. What are those critical areas, and take it in a phased approach, pilot, whatever. You can spread out after, you can replicate, but at least look at those critical areas. Agree among yourselves, even as you compete. In the time of a disaster, some laws get relaxed, things change and allow us to be able to be more flexible and come together. And of course, it's going to call for discipline. I heard you speaking, Herman, about you having a prioritization in terms of restoration, but in the time of crisis, the demands and the pull and push factors, you relax those. The truth is you have to be disciplined. And we know about the importance of drills and simulations and the mechanisms that the more you go through, the more disciplined you become. But I just want to commend this, no real question. But I just really want to underscore just my appreciation for this discussion. Thank you very much.
See, the MP has a question. Do we have any questions online as well? Can we check online? No questions online. All right, let's hear from MP Phillips.
Well, let me say that I'm happy that I am here, sir. I know my response only came in yesterday, but I wish that more of my colleagues were here, especially those who were affected mainly by Hurricane Beryl. One of the challenges that I faced as the Member of Parliament, especially in Northwest Manchester, and the northern side of my constituency, especially that section overlooking St. Elizabeth, got impacted very hard, compared to the other sides of the constituency, was communication. Because I had to reach out to the Minister of Energy to be able to get an update on JPS restoration in my own constituency. And it's a similar thing to do with the utilities. I think we have to find a way, this is ODPM and OUR, in how it's not expecting to hear from everyone, but how it is there is a centralized hub to communicate with us, because we are the first responders. Before you even get up out of your bed, or we are there in the communities right after the hurricane. And we are unable to communicate because we just do not have the information. Right? So that is something that I think that we need to look at. I heard your NWC about the wayside tanks. Only 30% of my constituency has potable water. And the challenge that we have is really access. But when you have a hurricane like that, there's a shortage of trucks in the parish. Even now that we're seeing a drought, there's a shortage of trucks. It is how that we get to replenish those wayside tanks. And I have the Cabinet Secretary here, but how we get resources out to the municipal corporations to be able to replenish these wayside tanks. Because we may install them as members of Parliament, but then we depend on the municipal corporations and ourselves to replenish these wayside tanks. JPS, even though we said that 90% of the country has electricity, as a member of Parliament for a deep rural constituency, when there is no response from rural electrification, the big question is, how do we supply electricity to those who do not have? And that is where you get the throps. But then when the service line only runs along the main road, but then off the track and their houses, how is it that they access electricity? As Member of Parliament, the only way is by either running their own wires, which they cannot afford, or we get a project through rural electrification, which is basically non-existent. When they come to JPS, there's a huge infrastructure cost which they can't afford. And I always ask the question, if you are the one that is going to benefit from them paying the electricity, why should they put in the infrastructure that is going to be owned by you? It is something to look at, because there's still a lot of customers out there that cannot access electricity, especially in rural Jamaica, and they end up wanting to pay, but end up having to get somebody to steal wires somewhere to come and sell them at a reduced cost for them to run their own wires to their houses. It is something that you have to look at if you want to reduce some of that theft in a sense, because those persons are legal customers too, because they run the wire down that path. But it is how it is that you can reduce the infrastructure cost to them to get the wire. All right, thank you.
No. So I'll say, MP Phillips, thanks for your thoughts. More than willing and looking forward to engage in terms of what are the opportunities there. I'll say very clearly, I'm all for more customers coming on the grid. And I'm all for partnering to unlock that opportunity. So I look forward to our engagement on that regard so we can share perspective and lens and see what are the possibilities there, while of course partnering with our dear regulator friends.
I know we have the mayor of Black River here in the room as well. Can you raise your hand? Joel? We have the mayor of Maypen here. All right, would you like to make a quick comment? Because your community was also affected.
Yeah, we were impacted severely. My concerns were, well, I've heard it addressed by JPS. The fact that the infrastructure was found wanting in many respects. Poles that were not in place during prior to, which means that there were no infrastructural work being done prior to Beryl, prior to Beryl. So it left us extremely in a very difficult situation following the hurricane. And that is the reason why we were impacted so badly. You mentioned about debushing of lines. That is one area. I've written to JPS recently on that matter. Because in and around the town of Maypen, you have a lot of that kind of infrastructural work that needs to be done. And I would love to see more of that now, being done now, before the hurricane season steps in.
No, thanks for that. I think, as you said, we realize the opportunities in regards to vegetation management, and we have a clear plan with higher tiered contractors, high quality management to execute on that plan. In regards to the poles and thinking poles are not maintained, I would say the one thing we have to keep in mind, as I said before, the infrastructure is designed for a category 3. We got hit with a category 4. So what that means is that the current infrastructure, pristine, brand new, everything good, was subject to design conditions that exceeded what it was designed for. So with that, you're gonna have damage and you're gonna have extensive work in order to rebuild. The good news there is we're looking at a resiliency strategy in terms of prioritizing critical loads and also building out for category 5 going forward. But I want to be very clear. Under the current construct, you put in a brand new pole, brand new infrastructure to our design conditions of category 3, Hurricane Beryl come, category 4, it's gone. It's like having a rooftop on your house that's designed and reinforced. You have a couple sheet of zinc, you have a couple sheet of lumber for category 3. If category 4, category 5 gone, your roof gone. What you have to do? You got to reinforce that, more lumber, more zinc, more resilient stuff for strengthening. That's just the reality of how it works.
I also take the mayor's point though, because I can tell you on my street, the 2 poles that went down were already lean before Beryl.
Kalelo, can I just make a point here? And probably Mail, I would just posit something to you as well. In other territories globally, on the matter of vegetation, municipalities enforce this on the part of the consumer to make sure that their vegetation stays within their walls. Is that something that could be looked at in Jamaica particularly? We can understand the major arterial routes where, for instance, it has to be bushed, etc., where there are no housing, farmland, etc. But in terms of within a dense urban area where you have a tree within your 4 walls, right? And we see it as the obligation sometimes on the consumer to make sure that that vegetation is within check. And I think that's one of the things that we have to think about from a municipality perspective in terms of how we get that kind of enforcement happening as well.
And with that, we're going to bring our panel
Thank you, Steve.
discussion to a close. We're out of time, but we can talk afterwards as well. I do want to say, however, that to me, one of the most encouraging things coming out of this conversation is the collaboration that we're seeing here, not only on the stage between our utilities and the regulators and all the institutions, but with other stakeholders as well. I'm very encouraged by hearing the level of collaboration and also by hearing even the activity that you have planned for Monday coming up. And so this is the type of thing that we want to see continue. With that, we're going to close the panel discussion, and I invite Elizabeth Bennett Marsh back to the stage to deliver our closing remarks and vote of thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sure we'll all agree that those presentations and the engagement was very useful. Do you agree with me? Thank you. And while they take their photo up, I invite our two of our other Deputy Directors General, Cheryl Lewis and Cedric Wilson, to come and make presentations as a token of appreciation to our panelists. So first, I will ask Cheryl to make presentations to our panelists and Cedric to our moderator. So if you could come on the stage this side, Cheryl. Thank you. Okay, so they're taking a quick photo up. All right, Cheryl, can you do the honor starting with Mr. Price, then Mr. Grant? Then Mrs. Will Fagan and Mr. Murad. As they do that, I want to invite you to just complete our feedback forms. We have the barcode at the center of all of the tables. If you haven't yet gotten a physical copy, we prefer you scan the barcode. But if it is that you feel more comfortable with a physical copy, then we have circulated some as well. And Cedric, if you can come as well. Thank you very much, Sharon. Thank you. Thank you very much, panelists. And as we wrap up this morning, we've heard some very insightful information from all of the utilities. But for me, my key takeaway is central among everything else leading up to, during, after Beryl lessons learned is about key communication with our key critical stakeholders and the need for greater collaboration. I want to really thank our panelists. We love to have them. We wanted to say how much we appreciate the fact that they have made time to be here today to open themselves up for critical analysis of their operations. We want to thank you for being here today, and for those who joined us online. It really means a lot to us. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone here who came today, as I said before, and of course to our behind the scenes team. Things may have seemed to work smoothly this morning, but it was not without the strong effort of the OUR team. I want to really, really thank them. Thank you very, very much. And of course our technical team. from TTN. So without further ado, I'm Elizabeth Bennett Marsh, Public Education Specialist at the OUR. See you again next year. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.